You ever bought something you really wanted, and less than a week later, that feeling just vanished? Not the thing itself. The thing was still there. The bag, the sneakers, the car, the trip you spent months planning. All of it's still there. But that feeling of finally making it, gone. Quietly. No warning. And just like that, you started thinking about the next one. Someone dropped a comment online this week that stopped me dead in my tracks. They wrote, "People in their 20s are torching their financial future trying to cosplay the lifestyle of people in their 40s. People who had decades to build actual wealth before social media turned life into a competition that never ends." Read that again, slowly. Torching their own future, trying to cosplay, a competition that never ends. That's not a comment about money. That's a comment about an invisible force most people never learn to identify. Because this problem doesn't start in your bank account. It starts way before that. It starts the exact moment you look at someone else's life, on your feed, at an event, in a casual conversation, and feel that familiar pressure, that low-grade anxiety of falling behind, like there's a place everyone else has already reached and you haven't, and then you run, buy, travel. Stack experiences, upgrade the car, switch up the aesthetic, post, wait for the feeling to hit, and it doesn't stick. It never sticks. Someone else said something I haven't been able to shake. They bought their dream car, the car everybody wanted, and were over it within weeks. Then realized it was never their dream car. It was everybody else's dream car. They'd been chasing a desire that was never theirs to begin with. That's what this video is actually about. Not consumerism, not hobbies, not people making bad money decisions. It's about a force operating underneath almost every choice you think you're making freely, one that hijacks your identity before it ever touches your wallet. That takes the things you genuinely love and turns them into another race you never signed up for. And the most unsettling part? It works best when you can't see it. Today, you're going to understand how this system was built, how it captures what you want, what you value, and what you believe you need to become who you're trying to be, and what actually changes when you finally stop running. If you've ever felt like you're chasing something but can't quite name what it is, subscribe. This channel exists to expose the blind spots no finance course will ever show you. Drop a comment below. When was the last time you bought something chasing a feeling that didn't last? Before this video's over, you'll know exactly why. There's a question that sounds simple, but that most people have never actually stopped to ask themselves for real. Why do you want what you want? Not what you want. Why you want it. Because there's a massive difference between wanting something because it's going to bring real value to your life and wanting something because of what it's going to say about you to other people. And that difference is invisible, deliberately invisible. Think about any hobby. Doesn't matter which one. Photography, sneaker collecting, specialty coffee, classic cars, international travel. Now be honest with yourself. At some point, did you stop simply enjoying it and start thinking about how it would land with other people? If the answer is yes, you just found the prison. Because at some point over the last few years, something shifted. Not in people, in the environment. Modern society took almost everything people genuinely loved and turned it into signaling, into status language, into proof that you've arrived somewhere. The hobby became a portfolio. The trip became content. The car became a public identity. The experience became a post. And consumption became the primary way people found to tell the world who they are. And here's the part most people completely miss. This didn't happen by accident. There's an entire system that profits when you confuse identity with status. When you believe what you buy defines who you are. When the need to feel like you belong, to be seen, to be recognized, gets funneled into consumption instead of being met any other way. Social media didn't invent this dynamic. but it turbocharged it in a way that has no historical precedent. Because before you compared yourself to people in your neighborhood, your school, your circle, a relatively small group, relatively similar to you in terms of income and what was actually within reach. Now you're comparing yourself to the entire world, in real time, 24 hours a day, against carefully curated highlight reels from people you'll never meet, living financial realities completely different from yours, people who are often just as deep in debt as you are, trying just as hard to look like something they're not. Comparison has always existed. What changed is the scale, and the scale changed everything. Because when your baseline for normal is the infinite highlight reel of millions of people simultaneously, your own life is always going to feel like it's falling short, like something's always missing, like you're never quite there yet. And that's exactly the void the system steps into. Not to help you get there, to sell you the temporary feeling that you're getting closer. This prison doesn't have bars, doesn't have walls, it has a feed. It has notifications. It has the rush you feel for 2 days after you post something, and the quiet anxiety that creeps back in when the engagement drops off. And the cruelest part of all? Nobody forced you in here. You walked in thinking you were going to like what you found. There's a comment that surfaced on a video this week that puts into words something a lot of people feel but can never quite name. The person wrote, "I had to step away from hobbies I actually loved because I kept finding myself down rabbit holes researching gear and getting talked into buying stuff I never even used. The hobby turned into something else. It became a search, a purchase. And I didn't even notice when that happened. That's not a consumption problem. That's an invisible competition problem. Think about what happens when someone genuinely discovers a hobby. Something they actually love doing. Could be anything. Cooking, photography, running, collecting, playing an instrument, wrenching on an old car in the garage on weekends. At first, it's just yours. You do it because you want to, because you love it, because it gives you something that's honestly hard to put into words. And then the modern environment shows up. You start seeing other people doing the same thing, except with better gear, more skill. Better aesthetics, more followers, more validation, and something really subtle happens inside you. You stop doing it out of love, and you start doing it for position. Where do I rank in this? What do people think of what I put out? Does my setup say something about who I am? Am I progressing fast enough? Am I spending enough to be taken seriously? The hobby didn't change. You didn't change. What changed was the invisible layer of competition that got deposited on top of everything. And that's not a personal weakness. That's the predictable outcome of an environment that turned almost every form of personal expression into a public performance. A comment I can't stop thinking about was from someone who said they had to pull back from every hobby they had because they couldn't just enjoy anything anymore. Everything turned into research. Everything turned into comparison. Everything turned into this low-key anxiety about using the wrong product or being at the wrong level or investing time in the wrong thing entirely. That's real exhaustion. Not being dramatic. Not lacking gratitude. That's the direct result of genuinely trying to love something inside an environment that was specifically designed to turn everything into a leaderboard. And the quietest damage of all is what this does to emotional memory. There's a whole generation of people who remember what it felt like to love something before all this. Before the algorithm, before the feed, before comparison at an industrial scale. When you collected something because you loved it, not because it might appreciate. When you bought a car because it meant something to you, not because of what it would say to everyone else. When the trip was the experience, not the content the experience produced. That nostalgia isn't romanticizing the past. That's your nervous system remembering what it feels like to actually feel something without needing anyone else to sign off on it. The problem was never the object, never the hobby, never the car, the sneakers, the reservation at the spot everyone's talking about. The problem is the invisible race that got bolted onto all of it. That turned every personal choice into a public statement. That made enjoying something without posting it, without comparing it, without measuring it, start to feel almost naive. And while that race keeps running, one question never gets answered. When was the last time you did something and didn't think about how it would look to someone else? There's a French philosopher named René Girard who spent decades studying something that seemed simple, but the deeper he went, the more unsettling it got. Why do people want what they want? And the answer he found wasn't what most people expected. People, most of the time, don't actually desire things. They desire what other people desire. Human desire doesn't move from the inside out. It moves from observation, from imitation, from the mirror. Girard called it mimetic desire. And once you understand this concept, you can never look at your own wants the same way again. Think about it like this. You grew up never once thinking about owning a particular thing. It wasn't even on your radar. It didn't trigger any emotion. It meant nothing to you. And then you saw someone you respect, admire, or want to be like with that thing. Or you saw everyone suddenly wanting that thing at the same time. And out of nowhere, it started to feel desirable, essential, like part of who you're trying to become. The thing didn't change. What changed was the way other people were looking at it. That's the mechanism moving billions of dollars every single year, not the quality of the product, not its actual usefulness, but borrowed desire from other people projected onto it. A comment that came up this week said something that's been living in my head for days. The person talked about someone who bought their dream car, the car everybody wanted, and was completely over it within weeks. Then realized it had never been their dream car. It was everybody else's dream car. They'd been chasing a desire that was never born inside them to begin with. That's not a story about a car. That's a story about what happens when you spend enough time inside an environment of constant comparison. You start absorbing the desires of the people around you as if they were your own, without noticing, without questioning, without a single deliberate moment of choice. And here's the part that hits the hardest. Most people don't actually desire the thing itself. They desire what the thing communicates. They desire the social meaning it carries. They desire what it says about who they are to the people they're trying to impress, not the car. What the car says about you, not the trip. What the trip says about the kind of person you are, not the hobby. What the hobby signals about your level, your taste, where you belong. And there's one question that works as a dead simple test for this. If nobody could see it, would you still want it? If there was no feed, no post, no way to communicate it to anyone else, would you still go out of your way to have it? For some things, the answer is going to be yes, and those things are probably real, genuinely yours. But for a surprising chunk of the things you're chasing, the goals you're carrying, the objects sitting on your mental list of where you need to get to, the honest answer is going to be more complicated than you expected. And that's not a judgment. That's the normal functioning of a human brain that's been dropped into a comparison environment at a scale that has never existed before in history. The problem isn't that you've been influenced. The problem is that you never realized you were. We've talked about the system, about the comparison, about the desire that was never yours. Now let's talk about what all of this actually costs. And I'm not talking about money. Well, not only money. There's a tab that most people never run. Not because it's complicated, but because when you actually run it, the number is too uncomfortable to look at. Every time you buy status, you pay with something that never shows up on the invoice. You pay with time, with the hours you're going to have to keep working to maintain a standard that was built to impress people who mostly aren't even paying attention. With hours, weeks, years of your life allocated to maintaining an image that needs constant upgrading, because what impressed people yesterday doesn't cut it anymore today. You pay with freedom, with the ability to make real choices. Because when a significant chunk of your income is already spoken for, payments, subscriptions, standards you locked yourself into to signal a certain status, Your actual options in life shrink. You can't switch jobs. Can't take time off. Can't say no to projects that drain you because you've got a cost structure that doesn't forgive. You pay with peace of mind, with that feeling of solid ground underneath you, with the sleep that won't come when next month's bills are already underwater because of last month's lifestyle. And you pay with your future. That's the most expensive one, and the quietest. There's a comment I brought up earlier that I need to come back to because it's the most accurate summary of everything we're talking about. People in their 20s torching their financial future, trying to cosplay the lifestyle of people in their 40s. People who spent decades quietly building before they ever had anything worth showing. That's not a dig at a generation. That's a description of a timing trap, the modern system engineered to perfection. Because social media collapsed time. You see the result of 20 years of financial building, and your brain registers it as the starting point, as the baseline, as what normal looks like. And if you're not there right now, you're behind. So you start making 40-year-old decisions on a 25-year-old income. You finance what you can't afford. You take on standards you can't sustain. You spend the present in a way that mortgages the future. And you do all of it not because you're reckless, but because the environment around you has normalized this pace to the point where the person who isn't running looks like the odd one out. Someone shared a story about meeting a guy at Disney World, $180,000 in consumer debt, dropping $1,000 a day on a week-long trip. Not to celebrate anything, to escape the reality of a life built on debt that came from the exact same escapism logic. The status race doesn't start as self-destruction. It starts as a series of reasonable decisions, one at a time, each one making sense in isolation. The problem is the pattern they form together over time. And when you look back, the real price isn't in any single purchase. It's in the sum of freedoms surrendered slowly, so quietly, they never felt like a loss. If any of this is hitting close to home right now, say something in the comments. One word, one sentence, your whole story. And hit the like button if this video is naming something you've always felt but never been able to put into words. That tells me exactly what kind of conversation is worth keep having here. We've arrived at the question sitting at the center of all of this. Why does nothing ever feel like enough? You made it. You bought it. You earned it. You got to the place you'd been aiming at. And the feeling lasted days, sometimes hours. And then that familiar weight came back. That restlessness. That sense that something's still missing. That the complete version of your life is still one step ahead. That's not ingratitude. That's not lack of perspective. That's not a character flaw. That's neuroscience. That's psychology. And it's one of the most documented and least taught dynamics in all of human behavior. Let's start with the most fundamental mechanism. The human brain was built to adapt to anything. That was essential to the survival of our species. You adapt to cold, to heat, to pain, to comfort, and you adapt to achievements. Scientists call it the hedonic treadmill. The idea that human beings have a baseline level of satisfaction they always return to, regardless of what happens. You make more money, you adapt to the new standard, and drift back to the same level of satisfaction you had before. You buy the thing you wanted, you adapt to it being part of your life, and drift back to that same baseline. The treadmill keeps moving, you keep running, but where you actually stand never really changes. Now add a second layer. Psychologist Alain de Botton spent years studying what he called status anxiety. And what he found is that this anxiety doesn't come from poverty. It comes from comparison. You don't feel insufficient in absolute terms. You feel insufficient relative to someone. And in an environment where your comparison pool is the infinite feed of millions of people simultaneously, there will always be someone ahead of you. Always. No exceptions. The comparison horizon never closes. And then there's a third layer, the cruelest one of all. Psychologists call it the arrival fallacy. The illusion that satisfaction is waiting for you at the finish line. Except the finish line doesn't exist. Or more precisely, it does exist. But the moment you get there, it moves, automatically, to the next level, the next thing, the next milestone, the next version of what would finally be enough. And you never stop to realize that's not a coincidence. That's the architecture of the race itself. Someone left a comment that stuck with me hard. They said the saddest thing they kept seeing was people saying, $1 million won't mean anything by the time I retire. And they fired back, but neither will zero. Something is better than nothing. That response carries something important, because the problem isn't the goal. The problem is that when a goal gets contaminated by comparison, logic, and status, it will never be enough. Doesn't matter the number, doesn't matter the object, doesn't matter the achievement, because the question being answered isn't how much do I need to actually live well. The question being answered is, how do I stack up against everyone else right now? And that question has no final answer. It never will. Here's the biggest insight in this entire video. The problem was never that you haven't achieved enough. The problem was the nature of the race you've been running. A race that was designed without a finish line, that was built to keep you in perpetual motion, that profits specifically from your continuous dissatisfaction. And as long as you can't see the structure of the race, you'll keep assuming the problem is your speed. Run harder, achieve more, buy more, and wonder why the feeling never sticks. Now you know why. So what do you actually do with all of this? I'm not going to hand you a list. I'm not going to give you 5 habits. I'm not going to talk about spreadsheets, cutting your daily coffee, or investing the difference. That's not what this video is about, and that's not what you actually need right now. What you need right now is a different lens. A different way of seeing the choices you're already making every single day without realizing you're making them. Because the way out of this race doesn't start with a financial decision. It starts with a question. Whose goal is this? Not in some abstract philosophical sense, in the immediate practical sense. When you look at the goals you're chasing right now, the standards you're maintaining, the things consuming your time and your money at this exact moment, where did they actually come from? Did you choose this in a moment of genuine clarity, thinking about the kind of life you actually want to live? Or did you absorb it from the environment around you, from constant comparison, from the quiet pressure of a feed that never shows anybody standing still? Because there's a massive difference between building a life and performing one. Building a life is slow. It's often invisible to everyone else. It doesn't generate much content. It doesn't land at dinner parties. But it creates something real. It creates margin. It creates options. It creates the ability to say no to things that drain you and yes to things that actually matter. Performing a life is immediate. It's visible. It generates fast validation. But it burns exactly the resources you would need to build something that lasts. And here's what nobody tells you about financial freedom. Most people think financial freedom is a number, a net worth, a passive income stream that's going to show up someday and fix everything. But real financial freedom doesn't begin when you make more money. It begins when you stop buying goals that belong to other people. When you stop funding an identity that was built to impress people who mostly aren't even paying attention. When you stop using the present as a stage for a version of yourself that only exists to be seen. That doesn't mean living with less. It means living with more clarity about the why behind every choice. It means when you buy something, you know exactly who you're buying it for. It means when you chase a goal, you know where it actually came from. It means when you look at your life, you actually recognize it as yours. Someone left a comment that stayed with me since the moment I read it. They said the one hobby that hadn't been touched yet by comparison culture and status signaling, they were going to keep it to themselves, hide it, protect it, because it was the only place left where they could just enjoy something without all the noise. That's someone who found, even without naming it, exactly what we've been talking about. A space where the desire is still yours, where the experience doesn't need to be broadcast to have value, where you get to exist without needing to be validated. That space can be bigger than one protected hobby. It can be the entire architecture of your financial life. But for that to happen, you have to see the race first. Recognize the rules you never agreed to follow, and consciously decide which ones still make sense for who you actually are, not for who the algorithm expects you to be. Maybe you're not falling behind. Maybe you're finally stepping off the track. And if this video cracked something open that you want to keep thinking about, the next video showing up on your screen right now goes one level deeper into this. This channel doesn't stop at the surface of financial behavior. It goes all the way down to the forces that create it. That's the kind of analysis that permanently changes how you see every financial choice you're still going to make.